Breaking news out of West Africa, a story that will be written into the modern history of the Sahel. A story of pain, resilience, defiance, and now, hope. Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation often described as the beating heart of the Sahel, has for years been trapped under the shadow of terrorism. Villages once full of laughter turned silent. Fields once ripe with crops abandoned. Families torn apart by insurgent raids that came in the dead of night. But today, the air carries a different sound. Not the echoes of gunfire, but the faint stirrings of relief. In a remarkable military success, the armed forces of Burkina Faso have launched and executed a sweeping operation in the eastern region of the country. This is not a small headline. This is a turning point. The military breakthrough. The details are staggering. Over 100 enemy combatants were neutralized. Dozens of heavily armed militants were captured alive. Their weapons, once instruments of fear, now lie in the hands of the National Army. Hidden stockpiles of ammunition were seized. Communication networks used by extremists were shattered. And perhaps most importantly, communities that had lived for years in fear are breathing again. For the first time in a long time, children can walk outside without the constant watch of armed men. Markets can reopen. Families can gather without fear of an ambush. This victory is more than tactical, it is symbolic. It is proof that under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso is not only resisting extremism, it is reclaiming its future, from collapse to recovery. To truly grasp the weight of this moment, you need to remember where Burkina Faso stood not long ago. When Traoré took power, the nation was on the brink of collapse. Nearly 60% of its territory was under terrorist control. The government could claim authority over barely 40% of its own land. The map of Burkina Faso looked like a nation carved apart. Villages in the north and east were falling one after another. Terrorists were setting up checkpoints on highways. Humanitarian aid convoys were blocked. Schools were shut down. Hundreds of thousands of Burkinabe fled their homes. For ordinary people, daily survival became a gamble. And yet, in less than 2 years, that nightmare has begun to reverse. Traoré's government now claims control over 72% of the country. Think about that leap, from 40% to 72%. That is not a statistic. That is a seismic transformation. The strategy behind the success. How did this happen? The answer lies in a carefully crafted military strategy. Intelligence units began building networks of information, not only relying on satellites and drones, but on local villagers who risked their lives to report movements of extremists. Ground troops, often poorly equipped but highly motivated, advanced in coordinated waves. Air support struck precisely at supply lines and command posts. Military engineers cleared roads and rebuilt basic infrastructure, allowing food and reinforcements to flow. What made the difference was not only tactics, but ownership. For the first time in decades, the Burkinabe army was fighting under its own command, not as a junior partner to foreign forces. The French withdrawal and its impact. This brings us to one of the most controversial chapters in this story, the withdrawal of French forces. For years, France maintained troops in Burkina Faso under the banner of fighting terrorism. Yet during their presence, terrorist groups expanded their territory, seizing nearly 2/3 of the country. Critics ask difficult questions. Why were foreign armies, armed with advanced technology, unable to stop the spread of extremism? Why were local armies sidelined instead of strengthened? When Traoré made the bold move to expel French forces, many observers predicted disaster. Western analysts warned that the country would collapse within months, but instead the opposite occurred. Once foreign control ended, Burkina Faso's military reorganized, re-strategized, and took ownership of its defense. The results speak for themselves, a dramatic turnaround in territorial control. Human stories behind the victory. Behind every statistic lies a human story. In the eastern region, farmers are returning to fields that had been abandoned for years. Mothers who once carried their children on long journeys to displacement camps are finally returning home. Teachers are reopening classrooms where dust had gathered on blackboards, where entire generations of children had been denied education. For a farmer, this victory means more than security. It means planting seeds without fear of being shot in the fields. For a mother, it means the chance to raise her children without the trauma of hearing explosions at night. For a teacher, it means guiding young minds without armed men standing at the door. Traoré's leadership, at the center of this turnaround, is Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Unlike leaders who govern from distant offices, Traoré has spent time in the field, speaking to soldiers, visiting frontline villages, and engaging directly with the people. His leadership style is hands-on, symbolic of a generation of African leaders determined to break from the dependency of the past. His strategy has been clear. Take ownership of the fight, trust the will of the people, never bow to foreign pressure when the survival of the nation is at stake. His defiance has turned him into a rallying figure across Africa, not only in Burkina Faso. Regional implications. This victory is not isolated. Across the Sahel, a new narrative is emerging. In Mali, Niger, and beyond, governments are also distancing themselves from former colonial powers and asserting sovereignty. For decades, Africa was told it could not defend itself without foreign intervention. But the victories in Burkina Faso are dismantling that narrative piece by piece. This has broader geopolitical consequences. The Sahel is no longer a stage for great power competition alone. It is becoming a proving ground for African self-determination. The message to the world is unmistakable. Africa is not a playground for outside interests. It is a continent of nations ready to defend themselves. The road ahead, of course, challenges remain. Nearly a third of Burkina Faso is still under the shadow of extremist control. The fight is not over. Insurgent groups are adaptive, ruthless, and determined. But momentum is on the side of the Burkinabe. If current progress continues, combined with better equipment, stronger regional cooperation, and unity among the people, military analysts believe Burkina Faso could reclaim almost all of its land within the next few years. That would make it one of the most successful anti-terror campaigns in modern African history. A message to the world: as the dust settles in the eastern battlefields, one truth is emerging. Burkina Faso's fight is not just for itself. It is for every African nation told that it cannot survive without foreign control. It is for every community across the Sahel struggling for sovereignty. To the terrorists, this victory is a warning. Your grip is slipping. To the skeptics, it is proof. Local ownership works. To the Burkinabe people, it is hope. A future of freedom is within reach. Captain Ibrahim Traoré once promised to free his nation from terror. With 72% of the country now reclaimed, he has proven that words backed by courage and sacrifice can become reality. And so, history may one day look back at this moment, not as the end of a conflict, but as the turning point when Burkina Faso rose from the ashes of chaos and began its march toward freedom. This is not the end of the story. It is only the beginning of a new chapter. The march continues, the struggle endures, and the world is watching.